Common Room Radio. I'm Sarah Kate Bazan, and I'm 12, and I have to get back to work.
I'm Alistair Stevens, and I'm not going to stand here and be eaten by some bitch's dinosaur. I'm finally doing something with my life.
And I'm Vinton Bain, and when that thing touched me, I started, reliving my past. It was hell. Most of it was just me playing the same dumb game. I didn't even think I liked it that much, but now I realize I basically wasted my entire existence.
Aw.
We might need an intervention for Vinton. I think that was a little too real right there. I played a lot of Arkanoid in my life, you guys. I understand. I empathize right now.
I have no time to play video games anymore. I just podcast, so we're good.
It's like a video game. And welcome to Excelsior. This week we are doing Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan with art by Cliff Chang, who I really like. He did the art on the Brian Azzarello run of Wonder Woman, which I really enjoyed there, and I really enjoyed it here.
It's kind of a different style in this book, but I'm into it.
Mm-hmm.
So Paper Girls first came out in October 2015, and this was the comic that was Stranger Things before Stranger Things was a thing.
Yes.
Paper Girls is a mystery/science fiction comic series by Image Comics, written by Brian K. Vaughan, art by Cliff Chang, as you mentioned, colors Matt Wilson, letterer and designer Jared K. Fletcher, and color flatter D. Knief, maybe?
I like Knief.
We're bad at names.
Knief works really
I actually
well.
didn't know what a color flatter was until
What is
this.
a color flatter?
Because I've never seen one specifically for that. This is somebody who goes in digitally and basically segments off everything, so the colors can just go in and be like with the little paint bucket, fill, fill, and just
I
change
actually
the colors.
I've learned how to do that with my monitor tablet. That's one of the ways to go through and do coloring.
I've never seen that somebody that's their specific job is they just set it up for the colors.
That's really neat.
And usually, I guess they're hired by the colors.
Okay,
so
that makes a lot of sense.
Industry business.
It takes a lot of work. It turns out that doing any kind of comic, but like digital comics and digital art, it takes forever. Art is hard, you guys.
Yeah. So Paper Girls won 2 Eisner Awards in 2016 for Best New Series and Best Penciler/Inker. And in 2017, Wilson won an Eisner for Best Colorist, in part because of his work on this series.
That's excellent.
Which I completely applaud.
Yes.
The colors in this book are extraordinary.
I love them. Yeah.
It stands out so much and really serves the art too.
Yeah. So before we continue on, we'll get into talking a little bit more about those creators, but let's flip over the VHS first. It's like totally the 80s again. When these 4 tubular newspaper delivery girls are out on the job, Halloween night. But things are about to get gnarly when these grody to the max dweebs deck them, and they find themselves wrapped up in a battle with dino-riding dorks who need to take a chill pill. Can they escape these wastoids? Like, gag me with a spoon. What's their damage? Things are about to get radical, for sure. So don't have a cow. Let's motor and get started with this righteous story.
Oh my God.
I feel like every week on Excelsior, we're getting closer and closer to dumping the rest of the show and just doing Vinton's
Seriously,
amazing
we're
recaps.
going to do a whole new podcast series that's just Vinton describing comics and movies.
I want that more than I want most things.
Yes.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And every new episode, we're going to get a new one. So we just got to keep coming up with new stuff. And patreon.com, just keep sending us money. We'll do more and more.
We're going to talk about our next topic here in Excelsior at the end of the show. But let me tell you, I am very much looking forward to the back of the VHS for that
Man, I haven't
one.
even started thinking of that yet.
That's going to be
That's
real
gonna be
good.
fun.
So this is 80s nostalgia. Vinton, I think you're entirely right when you called this Stranger Things before Stranger Things was a thing, because it really feels like it's evoking that same sense, not just of time and place. This isn't just the Midwest in the 80s, but it's that pop culture suffused, pop culture saturated version of the 80s, which I completely adore. And it's completely appropriate that we're here because the nostalgia clock is ticking, and basically we're nostalgic for everything that was 25 years before the present, and now we're in this late 80s early 90s kind of phase, and it works for me because I was there the first time and I remember all of this stuff, and
I was a 4-year-old child.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing that this comic does as well is not only does it actually tap into our nostalgia, what we're all desiring right now, the reason why we love Stranger Things, the reason why we love the book Ready Player One, but it also is commenting on it while it's doing that.
Yes.
It's commenting on why we need that nostalgia, why we seek that out. So I think there's some of that in there as well. And I know I haven't actually read past this volume, but I know that when you get past this, they lose some of the nostalgia and they're going for something different. So it's mostly just this volume is really like Stranger Things in that way.
Yeah, I haven't read past this volume either. And the cliffhanger ending at the end of issue
Is
5,
wild.
because this is another 5-issue short trade, I guess. Well, I guess it's not a short trade because the first issue was double-sized, as is so often the case with Brian K. Vaughan's work. But I was very surprised by the twist at the end.
Yes.
And I'm very curious about what happens
Yeah.
next.
Yes.
We'll talk about that when we get there.
Yeah.
These creators, as we mentioned, we already talked about Brian K. Vaughan in our Saga episode briefly, but just narrow it down a little bit more. Brian K. Vaughan is an award-winning writer of comics who sometimes works in television as well. His works include Why the Last Man, Saga, the Buffy comics, Doctor Strange, The Runaways, and the TV show Lost. I mentioned before that he is really good at writing women, including my co-host on Read Brave, Scout, had said that when she read his comic, she felt like he was the best man that has ever written a woman. Like she thinks that he might have been a woman at some point because he has it down to a T. And I think that really sticks out here when he's writing these 4 young girls. That's not something that usually that you see a creative team of 4 guys be able to do so well, but like every review I read and everyone I've talked to has said, yeah, this is exactly it. They nailed it. I don't know how, but they nailed it.
Yeah, he's got an amazing talent for that. And for finding the voice, I think, of all the characters,
Yes.
as in Saga, we get some very kind of constructed dialogue in this book, more so even than Saga, but it is so careful. It is so beautifully done. It reads like poetry, but still delivers the same narrative effect. I love the way that Brian K. Vaughan writes. And you're right, an ear for women, an ear for teenagers, too.
Yeah.
He really has the ability to evoke that kind of slightly awkward, slightly self-conscious, slightly, sophomoric kind of teenage dialogue. It works for me beautifully.
And then Cliff Chiang, the artist here, as you mentioned, he worked on Wonder Woman. That's really where he's famous from. That's where most people know him from. He was an assistant editor at DC Comics, and then went on to be an illustrator for a lot of their comics after that. And then, of course, has moved into Image and other creative-owned things like that. And I think now Paper Girls is one of his big claim to fame.
Yes.
And then Matt Wilson is an Eisner Award-winning artist and colorist working in the comics industry. According to Comic Book Resources, he is one of comics' most in-demand colorists. And you can really see why looking at this stuff here. Like I said, that he won an Eisner in part for this series, and he was nominated previously in 2015 as well. And he's also been nominated for the 2015 Harvey Award for Best Colorist. His works include Wonder Woman with Azzarello and Chang as well, Young Avengers with Karen Gillian, Daredevil with Mark Waid, Black Widow with Mark Waid, and The Mighty Thor with Jason Aaron.
Wait, like the most current Black Widow run? He's the colorist on?
The 2015-2016 Mark Waid one. I don't know if there's been one since then.
Yes, no, I think that's the one that I'm thinking of. Yeah, that also, the colors in that comic also are really, really excellent. We should think about doing that one pretty soon because it's very good.
And then you have Jared K. Fletcher as the letterer and logo designer. He's worked on hundreds of DC, Vertigo, Wildstorm comics, and some Marvel comics. And then either Kniff or Kniffy, I'm not sure, is also a colorist on Skybound's Redneck and Black Masks of the Dregs.
It's great work across the board. This is a gorgeous looking comic book that never, I think, sacrifices the art for the story. I think that this works simultaneously. As I said before, I'm like so much more a writer guy than an artist guy. My tendency with comic books is just to read the dialogue balloons and not really look at the art. But I found myself slowing down as I was reading this in a way that was very reminiscent of my experience reading Tim King's Vision series, actually. It's very detailed art as well, which Cliff Chiang manages to bring across in a really kind of sketchy and informal and slightly punky kind of way, which I really like. It so suits the subject material. And while you can tell that this is, connected to the Azzarello Wonder Woman run, it feels so different.
Yeah.
Both from, amazing. For the same artist, same colorist, for those two books to feel so profoundly different just blows me away because I have no talent for art. So I just marvel at it. This is sorcery as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, you basically drew a magic pentagram and then said the necessary incantation and art appeared.
That's basically what happens.
Good for you, Cliff Chiang and Matt Wilson, and also Sarah.
Oh, thanks.
I was reading some interviews with Brian K. Vaughan. There was 2 points I wanted to bring out before we dive into the comic itself. One was someone asked him about how he got this point of nostalgia and what it meant to him and why he was focused on it and just what his goal was in bringing that nostalgia out. And he said that he'd gone to school with Adam Goldberg, who created the TV series The Goldbergs.
Right.
And that this man had said that the sitcom that he created really looked at 80s through a sanitized view of rose-colored glasses. And really, when you look at the 80s and if you lived through them, there was a lot of darkness, a lot of sadness in the 80s. And he wanted to be really honest about that period. He wanted to see things honestly. And I think he nails that. He nails that there was a lot of bad stuff, even with the way kids were raised and the way the mindsets. I mean, at one point someone says you're from a really effed up time. And it's true. It is true. And also, as I mentioned before, this is a cast of female characters. The main characters are all female here, all 4 of them. And when the interviewer had asked him about that, he said that he worked at Marvel on Runaways, and he was actually the source of a big controversy because the Runaways was a team with more women than men on it, more girls than boys, as being they were children.
Yeah.
And this was a big controversy at Marvel because that's not the way it was supposed to happen, apparently,
Right.
to their staff. They were like, you have like your 1 or 2 token females, and that's all you get. You don't get to make a whole team of the majority female.
Oh, wow.
And so when he went to Image, you can do whatever you want. And he was
Yeah.
like, hey, I can just make them all female and no one's going to say anything. I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to have a reason for it. I can just do it.
That's fantastic.
And that was his reason for it, is that he didn't have to have a reason.
That's excellent.
It's
And I'm
very,
like-
very
and of course,
good.
things have changed at Marvel. We have whole teams of women now, which I really like. And that's what happens when we have editorial turnover.
Yes.
Yes, it's a tough week to be talking about women at Marvel, women in the comics industry. Again, there's been another surge of just outright flatly misogynistic responses
Yeah.
to
Which is
female
why-
creators, female editors in the comics industry this week. And it's tough, but things are getting better.
Yeah.
This is, we're arcing toward justice, as the universe tends to do.
And as we say here at Excelsior, make mine milkshake.
Yes, make mine milkshake. Absolutely.
All right, let's dive into issue 1. We are introduced to Erin, our main character, perhaps, of the
I think
girls,
so.
at least
Yeah,
at
yeah,
first
yeah.
here, in a dream sequence. She is holding an apple, and there is a creepy astronaut informing her that she's in heaven. Her sister is in hell. And as Erin tells a demon, fuck you, the astronaut says, we warned you, never eat from the tree of knowledge.
Yes.
And Erin awakes, seeing that her sister is on the bunk below and still alive.
I love this introduction because even before we see the time and place in which Paper Girls is set, we get this evocation of Krista McAuliffe, who
Yes.
was the teacher who died in the Challenger
Yeah.
disaster. She was the first kind of civilian astronaut who died in this horrifying shuttle explosion in 1986. So we're clearly in the immediate aftermath of that because Erin recognizes her immediately, even without seeing her face, which I liked a great deal.
Yeah.
Right. There's a few things throughout this comic, and then this sequence starts it off right away where I want to read way more deep into it, and I want to like finish this whole series and then go back and be like, was there more information here that I didn't get? Like, was there a reason it was her specifically, and was there a reason why she was singing this specifically? I didn't get a lot of anything deep reading into it, but I
Sure.
think there's something there, and I'm just not getting it yet.
Yeah, there are a couple of really powerful symbols in this dream sequence. The apple, of course,
Yes,
is
that'll
going to be
keep coming back
significant later. The piercing of her sister's cheeks reminds me of something. The demon plunges this jagged index finger through her sister's cheeks, and that reminds me of something, but I can't quite place it. So I
Yeah.
need to pay more attention to that. But there's a lot of powerful symbolism, and of course the symbolism of the apple and the tree of knowledge and the biblical connotations of that. That's pretty immediate.
I see the sweet Monster Squad poster on the wall when Erin wakes up. And if the creepy dream sequence didn't already win me over, I am now in love with this comic because I love Monster Squad. Have you guys seen Monster Squad before?
No.
A long time ago, 20 years ago,
This is the
maybe.
movie where we get the most famous quote, Wolfman has nards? I love it. It's so great.
I don't know what the other poster is right behind her bed either, right there on the top bunk, but I know that I recognize it. It's a little
I think it's
four-panel.
maybe Depeche Mode. I think I read that there was a Depeche Mode poster.
Oh, it could be. Yeah. Oh, that actually,
I'm not
that
looking
works
at it
quite
now,
nicely.
so.
Yes. I knew that I recognized it. I couldn't quite place it. Yeah.
So Erin gets up in the wee hours of the morning to run her paper route with the aftermath of Halloween illuminated through the neighborhood on what she calls Hell Morning, which is written on a Far Side calendar, which I also
love
like. Another
the
place
I
Far
love
it's
the
called
Far
it.
Side.
I grew up reading Far Side.
I
That's
did too.
pretty great. Yeah. On her route, she encounters a grossly rude boy dressed appropriately as Freddy Krueger. A trio of other paper girls arrive just in time, and the leader of the group crassly scares off the boy and his friends.
I love this weird setup. It is 4:40 in the morning of November 1st, and these kids are still dressed in costume.
Still,
Are
like,
they still trick or treating?
no, I think like because you see that Freddy Krueger kid has a package of eggs in his upper
Oh,
hand.
they're
good pull.
tricking.
Yeah.
They're tricking.
Yeah.
They're done treating. They are absolutely tricking all over the place.
Okay,
I
I like
also
that.
like when we get the 2-page spread where we see Erin on her bike riding
This
away from her
spread,
house. It's first of all,
beautiful.
it is beautiful. Like this is
so
a
gorgeous.
beautiful just illustration. The colors are amazing. The line work is amazing. All of it is great. But what I love the most is the big old like shooting star that we've got behind her. I wonder what that is.
Also, that 2-page spread there really evocative of Spielberg and really evocative of
Yes,
those 80s movies.
absolutely.
There's something about just riding a bike down the street with the sun just barely touching the sky, so where it's just like barely illuminating anything at all, to where you can tell it's gonna be like another hour before you see the sun.
Yeah.
there's something about that that's just like, yeah, that is 80s youth.
Yes.
What
No,
is-
you're
I- there's-
entirely
I don't
right.
know.
Yeah, when parents didn't care and kids rode around on their bikes with their walkie-talkies everywhere all the time.
It's a CB, thank you.
I want to ride around on my bike with a walkie-talkie. CB, sorry. You're right.
So we are then introduced to the trio, KJ, Tiffany, and their infamous leader, Mackenzie. So I do think it's worth pointing out here the homophobic slur that Mac throws out there as she
Yeah.
pulls up. We have
Yeah.
here one of our protagonists saying something that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable when
Yeah.
they read it. And I think this is good. I think this is good that this is here because it's actually really representing that is exactly what it was like. I heard that word left and right, and I grew up like, these girls would be older than me
Yeah.
by a little bit. And so like, this is pretty common. You would hear those things and you're actually going to see a bit of a story arc with her where she comes to figure out something about that later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is true. You grow up in certain households where people say things like that. And as kids, you just go, well, that's what dad says. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Well, and
Absolutely.
it doesn't go unchallenged.
Yes.
crucially,
Right,
on
'cause
the same
Erin
page.
absolutely
Erin
calls her out.
She says, you shouldn't call anyone the F word and anybody can get AIDS, not just gays.
Yeah.
Which is, progressive, sure, by the
For
standards of the time,
1980s, yeah.
but much more importantly, aligns us with Erin.
Yes.
Like, we're not in
Yeah.
any doubt here who our protagonist is in the
Right.
first
Yeah.
issue of Paper Girls.
Yeah. So the group splits with Aaron teaming up with Mac. A police officer stops to hassle Mac, and he seems to have a grudge against either specifically her or maybe her whole family. And already this comic, as we've already mentioned, feels so realistic. These are the kids I grew up with. They're crass, they're smoking, they're carrying their family's baggage in an instance with this cop here.
Yeah. There's a weird beat with the cop in the art where he gets out of his car and he's kind of, doughy. He kind of looks like
Sure.
small town cop, but he also has a prominent tattoo of like a woman,
A
let's
scantily
say
clad, a
busty
barely clad woman.
on his forearm. And I'm like, okay, this is 1989. Is that okay? Is that a thing that you could have when you were a cop in a small town in 1989?
Yeah, why not?
What is that telling us about this guy, about this world? But it's such an interesting detail. This is, again, because the art is so good and the coloring is so good, I'm slowing down and noticing details in the art,
Yeah.
which I never do.
I never do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, so while the art might be nice and clean, the things in the story realistically are not.
Yeah, fair.
KJ and Tiffany contact Mac and Aaron saying that they've been attacked. When the girls meet back up, they find out that Tiffany's other CB was taken by their attackers who spoke a strange language. Mac uses her CB to contact the attackers and warn them that they are coming to get them.
Yeah.
They ride in pursuit of the attackers to a neighborhood with houses still in development. Spying an open window, they go in and find a weird machine in the basement. Aaron realizes it looks like the Apollo capsule. And KJ remarks that it's the 50th anniversary of the World of Worlds broadcast, and somebody is probably pulling a prank. I like that she erroneously name drops Orville Wright, one of the Wright brothers, as the orchestrator of War of the Worlds prank, even though she means Orson Welles. And I love that kind of detail because in normal conversation, especially with kids, not everyone's going to get everything right. This is just
Yes.
random
Right.
information she heard somewhere, and so she's just conveying it back. So the writing should reflect that. But I also wonder if the Wright brothers error is an Easter egg in the story itself. So
interesting.
I want to look more into that too. That's another one of those things I was like, I wonder if there's specifically a reason she
Obviously,
said
we have
that
to read the
name.
rest of the
That is
series.
exactly the kind of thing that Brian K. Vaughan would include.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, as it's almost a joke, it's a character beat, but then it's also significant. Yeah, the
Right.
dialogue is this actor named like Orville Wright tried to trick everyone into believing there was a real alien invasion going on and the whole country freaked out. I like that very much.
Do you guys have a favorite of the Paper Girls? I know that we're very early into the volume here, but which one is your favorite? Or are they all your favorites?
They change from page to page for me.
Oh,
I'm like,
really?
yeah, this one's my favorite. And a few pages later, okay, this one's my favorite. A few pages later, all right.
I think I like Aaron the most. I guess my primary criticism of the ensemble cast in these first 5 issues is that I don't get like a clean sense of KJ and Tiffany.
Yeah.
Like they don't seem as defined as the other characters. But then
Sure.
I've only read the series like 1.5 times. I read the
Right.
first volume 1.5 times.
Yeah, well,
so-
that's really interesting. Like, I know that Erin is supposed to be like our main protagonist, and we are supposed to attach ourselves to her. But like, I want to know KJ's deal.
Yeah.
KJ is my favorite. Why is she walking around with a hockey stick strapped to her back? Like, this is my girl.
It was the 80s.
I guess so. Yeah.
I really like Tiffany's arc too. We'll get to that, but she has a nice arc in this story.
Oh, yeah.
And we mentioned, like you mentioned, the hockey stick there. They all kind of have different weapons or something they're carrying. Like Aaron has the pocket knife.
Yes.
They're all kind of set up with like some kind of token item. And I remember reading that Brian K. Vaughan specifically, not necessarily weapons he was giving them, but tokens to mean something that was going to mean something to them.
It's almost like they're a D&D troop, and like every
Right.
like they've each got like their very specific role. So
Which
it's
is
like
a great pull for 80s movies movies
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
when you would define
Absolutely.
your ensemble cast in exactly that way. You know, the Goonies does that. That's completely appropriate. I hadn't caught that, but that's gorgeous. Yeah.
So this machine starts to hum and emit light, and we see the girls' skeletons through this light. They flee the house expecting the machine to explode, but it just knocks the power out in the neighborhood, and they see the sky lit up and fantastical as never before, as not even possible.
Yeah.
Then they see the attackers.
That's such a beautiful panel too.
Yeah, it
When
is.
you've got
It's
Aaron just looking
completely
up into the
beautiful.
sky saying, "Oh my God," it's like,
And they do. They take a whole quarter page for it, just like
and
just
it is a
let you view it.
phenomenal panel,
The
so
lettering
gorgeous.
is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so fantastic. Then they see the attackers, a group of people wrapped in black cloth like ninjas that we spied in the background early on in the issue. They engage and overtake one, pulling its mask off to reveal an oddly deformed face and strange pupils. That the being immediately reminds me of Sloth from the Goonies.
Yes.
Sure.
Sure, that's probably most people, and I think that's purposeful. The creature strangles Mac, but Tiffany hits it off, and it runs into the woods, spouting its strange language, seemingly chased off by some kind of ver sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
The girls see that the being dropped something, a device with a symbol, an apple, or as we know it, the Macintosh Apple logo.
Yeah.
This is the first instance that I was just like, wait, what the hell is happening in this? I mean, listen, you give me spaceship thing in the bottom of a basement. Okay, cool, I'm there. You give me like weird mutant guys who are running
Yeah,
around. Cool,
yeah.
I'm there. Suddenly you're showing me the Apple logo and I'm like, okay, seriously though, what the hell is going on?
Right, but the Apple logo did exist at this point in
Yes.
history. We get that called out in the second issue. That
But it was still like the little rainbow
it was
one,
the rainbow
right?
logo, right? But
Yeah.
it was the
Right.
same shape.
And this is a tiny device of some sort, and they're only used to seeing it on giant computers.
yeah,
Yes.
no,
So
absolutely.
So that's really where the strangeness comes in for them. They're staring at this thing going, what could this be? And they talk in the next issue, maybe it's a tiny computer?
Yeah. Tiny
That's
computers.
a
impossible.
tiny computer.
So
That's
the
nonsense.
end of this issue, there's a funny Paperboy sign up in the back of the issue, and then pictures of all the creators of the comic from the 80s, including Brian K. Vaughan with Spider-Man. And I really like it. Like just old photographs. It's fantastic.
That is a ropey looking Spider-Man though in that picture. I like it quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So issue 2 is the first issue that starts off with this alien language on the first page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this one is, I'm assuming there's supposed to be titles for the issues. That's what I'm going to go with as we go through the podcast. This one is titled Nostalgia is Death.
I'm so glad that you knew that because as soon as I saw that, I thought, I really hope that Vinton has figured out the translation for these
Yeah,
and shares them
yeah.
with us when we
was-
record this episode.
Pretty clear this was going to be a Futurama style,
Yes.
right.
substitution cipher. Yeah.
I love the entire color scheme on this first page
Oh,
of
yeah.
issue 2. I mean, just it's so good. It's so good. It's unnecessarily beautiful.
yeah.
So I have translations for everything that's said throughout the comic, but most of what they actually say isn't really important. It's just like, hey, over here, hey, we didn't mean to do that type of thing. And I might just briefly mention that, but I'm just going to go ahead and point everyone to this website where I found the translations. It's literally the only website I could find, just a WordPress that's where somebody figured it all out.
Oh.
It's called the Dinglehopper.wordpress.com.
Dinglehopper, that's the fork in the Little Mermaid.
Yeah.
We will add a link in the show notes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You can find they go issue by issue, post by post, and
Great.
they have images where they just transcribed everything. It's
That's fantastic. How
I
did they find the
love the
translation?
internet. That's
They
so
figured
good.
it out. They went. I figured it out by post. So some of the first posts they don't have every letter, just the ones that were used there. So they have a little guide. And the next post they figured out more letters and
How
added
did
more
they
to the
figure that
guide.
mess out? That's insane.
Cryptology, man. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Wow.
I'm not good enough to do it. That's for sure.
It's not too hard if it's a substitution cipher because of the
Oh, yeah,
common
substitution ciphers are
frequency of
easier.
E, T, and R in the
Yes.
English language. You can pretty much
Okay.
get those and then work backwards.
So you
from
basically
there,
just
yeah.
have to figure out, all right, well, here's a 4-letter word that,
Exactly right.
okay, so what
Yeah.
is, okay, all right, cool.
Usually
Guesswork.
it's a 3-letter word with a T at the beginning and an E at the end.
And then you figure it out
And
from
then
there.
you can figure it out from there, yeah.
But how do you figure out your T and your E, I guess? I don't know. Anyway.
But can we take a moment, as we've already gotten to issue 2, and appreciate these covers and that coloring job?
I am obsessed.
The covers are so
profoundly
beautiful.
in love with the colors. I want the covers of all 5 of these issues, I guess, just
as
up on the
prints.
wall here
Yeah,
in the
here in
studio.
the studio.
They're
Yeah, yeah,
so good.
The cool thing to me is it reminds me of, I think it was maybe some music player did this back in the day where they had like commercials where I think it might have been
It was
iTunes.
Apple.
It was Apple way a billion
Everything
years
was
ago.
one color except
Yep.
like the player was a different color. And you see that on issue 2 here. It's all red except for the Walkman.
Yes.
What I love about this too is that the vibrant yellow color of the Walkman de-emphasizes the gun in her other hand.
Yes.
Oh my
which
God.
is
Okay, I've been sitting
really
here
great.
looking at this for 3 minutes and did not realize she had a gun in her hand.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Wow.
great. Yeah.
So we open up on one of the black cloth wrapped beings running down a street, and one of the classic neighborhood watch signs as a colorful storm brews in the skies. And that neighborhood watch sign does remind me of my childhood. I saw those everywhere.
Yeah,
growing up,
yeah.
So definitely. The being jumps some fences, and we hear the ver 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 sound, and a monstrous foot is seen. The wrapped being drops a bag of 80s tech, blood splatters, and a metal hand picks up the stolen CB.
Hey, what does the guy say before he gets attacked by the dinosaur?
Shit.
Excellent.
That's what I assumed.
He
Excellent.
says shit both times. So I like that these guys seem to be collecting technology for something, and it reminds me of when I was a kid and I used to take broken technology, like broken telephones and computer parts and stuff, and I would just combine all the elements to look like some kind of fancy future computer.
You are the protagonist
Yeah.
in somebody's sci-fi story.
There's also a pretty major Easter egg here, or not even an Easter egg, but a spoiler, a reveal here in this panel, because when the bag spills, you see the 1980s era cell phone, but you also clearly see
An
little flip
iPad.
phones, and possibly what is an iPad, and certainly what is a Mac mouse. And these things
I
had
totally
not been
forgot.
invented
It
at that
wasn't just
time.
80s technology.
No,
I
it's
totally forgot that when I was writing my notes down.
technology from the 1980s
Absolutely.
up to and including the present day. Yeah, which I
Wow.
love.
Yeah, it's an iPad Air 3.
That's very specific for this panel that we're going.
Well, it looks really thin. It's only two-dimensional.
I say that I used to just take that technology and put it together like an imaginary computer. Turns out prop people did that too, because then I started watching Doctor Who and I was like, hey, that's how you made up the TARDIS, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah?
You just got
Yeah,
a
no,
table and
absolutely,
threw all
yeah.
sorts of broken stuff
Yeah.
on it.
Oh, these two things probably joined together. Oh, God, okay. But it does look cool, though.
Yep, it
so
sure does. The girls arrive at Erin's house, but her parents and her sister are nowhere to be found, and the phones are dead. We get a reference to the movie Mask about Rocky Dennis in regards to the black cloth being, which I really appreciate. Max suggests that they go to their house because her dad has a gun, and Erin doesn't like where this idea is leading. On the way, they discuss what might be going on. Monsters, Russian nuclear mutants, or perhaps time travel?
can we just pause for a second here as we arrive at Erin's house and look at the coloring in the hallway where we have this, I don't know what you would call that. It's almost like a salmon pink kind of coloring throughout.
Yeah.
And then as we transition into the kitchen and it moves into this indigo tone, which is, it's so gorgeous. And it is exactly the palette that you would get from a 1980s movie where they're shooting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but they've
Yes.
tinted it to make it look as though it's the middle of the night.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I had not thought of that. That's
perfect.
brilliant. So on the way, they're discussing what might be going on. Erin recognizes the Mac logo on the device that they found and wonders if it's the type of microcomputer, an unimaginable device to the other girls in 1988. We get a reference to Star Trek IV when talking about time travel.
Yep.
They see a boy they know in a wolf mask, but he isn't responding. Then they hear that sound, ver, 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 and they look up to see the swirling storm skies filled with flying pterosaurs.
It's pretty perfect.
It's really good.
It's a pretty perfect
Another
visual.
two-page spread that is
I
just
kinda love it.
phenomenal.
Yeah. And we also have another, light in the sky, whirling vortex. And we don't usually have dinosaurs in those, but I'm glad that we do.
Yeah, this one's nice. Also, it's not blue.
That's also another big 80s thing too, though, because like every movie had a swirling vortex with
Oh,
lightning
yeah.
in it. And then also a lot of movies had like dinosaur stuff going on.
Absolutely.
So, there you go. The boy actually disappears and the girls all rush into Mac's house. They find Mac's stepmom with her dad's gun. It's important to note Mac correcting this when she introduces herself as her mom.
Yeah.
There is a really funny beat that I like when her stepmom is just downing some whiskey, I assume. And she says she met my dad in AA. And the stepmom says, which part of Anonymous don't you understand? And the Mac retorts, I don't know. Which part of not drinking don't you understand?
Fair question.
See, this raises an interesting question for me because I don't know if Alice has been drinking this whole time, if she is just,
Given up.
kind of a
With
wreck of a
everything
person,
happening.
or if
Yeah.
this is brand new, because she says in the next panel, what difference does it make now? Don't know if your friends have noticed, but the GD world is ending. And I like that beat very much. So I don't know, has she been drinking this whole time?
I don't know.
Or
I
did
think
she
that
literally
I think she
just
just
start again?
literally
I
after
think
started.
she
AA?
just started
That
again.
would be my hand
Although,
on
if
it.
that's the case, if both of these adults are in AA, what is that alcohol doing in the house if one of them has not been
Oh, that's
drinking on the
fair.
sly?
That's fair. Yeah.
Because I bet the liquor
All
store's
right,
not
yeah.
open
Okay,
right
so maybe
now.
it was drinking
could
on
be
the
Max.
sly. It was drinking
Max
on the sly
boots.
before this, but now she's just straight chugging
Yeah.
the bottle.
Yeah.
So she is basically convinced that they have been left behind in the Kirk Cameron religious sort of way.
Yes.
Huh?
She saw Mac's dad disappear right before her eyes. She aims the gun at Mac, and Aaron says, "Look, we don't know exactly what's happening out there, but it doesn't have anything to do with God. Trust me, I've gone to Catholic school my whole life." And then she says, "Yeah, I thought I knew everything too when I was your age." And here's this interesting note, I think that's really a comment on why we often feel nostalgic. She says, "I hated being 12. Back in 65, I just wanted to grow up so fast so everything would finally be good, you know? But the truth is, life was actually way better back then. Turns out the older you get, the more everything just turns to shit."
1965, 25 years before the period in which this story is set. Human beings are naturally nostalgic, or I guess at least human beings in Western culture are naturally nostalgic for 25 years ago,
Yes.
whenever that was. That's going to be really weird in like 10 years' time, you guys. Things are going to get very strange.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think it introduces to this idea of like generational conflict, because later we're going to have the reveal, teenagers. We're just like you. We're teenagers. But we've already foreshadowed that by having Aaron refer to the guys in the Freddy Krueger mask as teenagers. Our paper girls are not teenagers. They are not
they're
yet a part
12-year-olds.
of the classic generational conflict of, you know, the young versus the old, the up and coming versus the old and stale. This is a generational conflict that is continuing throughout American pop culture, but isn't yet for these girls evident.
Yes.
And that's it's classic Brian K. Vaughan. He takes an idea that appears completely superficial and then just keeps adding layers and layers and layers of subtlety and complexity. He's a hell of a writer.
Yeah, he's very, very good. I like him quite a lot, it
Sarah,
turns out.
Before we move on to onto issue 3, I wanted to ask you a little bit, because you are a little younger than I am. In fact, both of you are younger than I am. You're both basically a year apart, right?
Yeah.
Vinton, you just turned 30. Sarah, you're still 29?
Yep, I'll
for
be 30
another
in
6
January.
months? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So do you guys have the same nostalgia for 1988, 1989, you know, that kind of
Well,
period?
1988 was the year that I was born, so I don't know how nostalgic I could be about that.
Yeah, but nostalgia doesn't necessarily, you know, it doesn't necessarily defer to your actual age.
Sure. No, okay, that's fair. Yeah. I think that for me personally, I don't find that the case. I mean, like I enjoyed Stranger Things. I think because like I grew up reading a lot of Stephen King and stuff like that, because like that's what my parents were reading. Like Stephen King is one of my dad's favorite authors. And so there was, I don't know, we talked about this once. It was either on Odd Man Out or on Porch Club, where we talked about this idea that's called Tosca, where it's like you're nostalgic or homesick for a thing that you yourself never experienced.
There's a Celtic word, hreath, which means basically the same thing.
That's
yes.
really good.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. But this whole idea, because I mean, like, I was never one of those kids who like ran around in a little brat pack on bikes, like having adventures. But I read about those kids growing up.
And you watched movies
and
about
I watched
those kids.
movies about those kids growing up. And so, like, I feel nostalgic. I guess that there are parts of the 80s, like part of this idea of like being young and going on adventures and almost this idea of like destiny calling you when you're young to something great that I feel nostalgic towards. But in reality, I'm really looking forward to being 30 because I'm so done with being in my 20s. I'm just so over it. I've been over it since I was like 25.
Vinton, does this speak to your personal recollection and experience, or to that kind of pop culture osmosis?
A little bit of both. I definitely was the city kid, and I would just like wander through the streets with my brother or ride my bike like way far away from home and find my way home somehow. And I have lots of memories of doing that. But more than that, I watched a ton of late 70s, early 80s movies, read books from then, read comic books from then. That's the era of comic books I really got into, especially with X-Men.
Sure.
And so really all of this speaks to that. That was the idea of what the world was to me, because I knew it through my media, especially when I stopped being a city kid and my family moved to the country and I didn't really do anything but hang out at my house and play with toys and watch movies and read comic books. And so like that was the world to me, and that's what it meant. So even though I was really more of a child of the early 90s than the 80s, being born in 87, that really does speak to me because the world I knew was the 80s.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'm 10 years older, basically, than both of you. And while I was alive at this period, I guess there's a distinction here, too, because I was Scottish. I grew up in the northeast of Scotland, so I didn't quite have the same connection. Because this kind of E.T., Goonies, Midwest American Steven Spielberg adventure always felt exotic to me. It always felt foreign to me
really?
because that was not my experience.
Yeah.
That, my friends and I didn't go out and bike around the neighborhood because, well, you would die. The wind in Scotland would claim you as its own and you would just be done. So it always felt different to me, but I think maybe that's why it feels still so cinematic to me. But I love this evocation of it.
Yes.
So, ending our issue, Alice moves the gun to her own head, and Mac struggles with her to take the gun away. Tears in her eyes, saying, "But I love you, Mom, I..." And then she gets cut off by a bang, illuminated over the other girls in the coloring, which is perfect, chilling. And that's the end of our issue. And I really like that she does call her mom there.
Yeah.
He calls back to where she says, she's not my mom. She's my stepmom. And then in that moment, she's like, no, I love you, Mom. Like, this is the only mom she's ever known, apparently, or at least she has a deep connection to her in that way.
Sure. Yeah. Mac obviously putting on like this really tough exterior for whatever reason, but still is a 12-year-old little girl.
This, too, to me was the first moment when I realized how fast this story was moving. I expected to have a volume of, well, something strange is happening, but we don't know what it is. And maybe we should spend a few episodes of our Netflix original TV show investigating it before we actually find out what's going on. But no, because, this is Brian K. Vaughan, and he's not going to waste any time.
Yes.
And we're going to get the whole story, and it's going to be fine.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that arc, that's, she's my stepmom, Mom, like that arc would occupy at least 2 issues of anyone else's story.
Sure.
Like that would take forever. You would take your time with it, but here we managed to compress it into what?
3 pages?
3 pages?
Like
Yeah. Which is crazy. But I love that. Yeah.
At the end of this issue, we have an article by comic journalist Cliff Biggers, who created the famous comic shop newspaper, about his time as a paperboy growing up. And it's really fascinating. It's a nice little read.
Yeah. That's cool.
Did
Once
either
again,
of you guys ever deliver papers?
I did.
Heck no.
Yeah. Never on a
did?
bicycle, but growing up, my best friend and I, his mom was ran a paper route on Saturdays. She would do the Sunday paper, and she would take her minivan, fill up the thing, but she would pay us to go with her so that we could get it done quicker. So we would roll the papers for her. We would fill up the van so much so that we couldn't actually sit in the seats. We'd like build little holes in the van.
Oh my
so
God,
we'd fill it up.
Vinton, I want a Steven Spielberg directed film about like your childhood and teenage years.
What's fun is we would build like those holes, and then we would make up stories to each other while we were driving around, and then she'd stop and we'd get out and we'd throw the papers everywhere we need to go, get back in, and then by the end of it, the sun was finally coming up. We each had $20. We'd go to Walmart and spend it on video games or whatever we could find.
Oh my gosh.
We did the thing.
That's no, you're right. With the soundtrack by John Williams. Like, I want to hear this thing now. Yes.
Like
This is perfect.
we needed you to be the star of Ready Player One.
I needed that too. So, issue 3. This translated from the text at the beginning is titled "Death is Forever,"
Which is a great callback. Nostalgia is death. Death is forever. We're building
Therefore,
a kind of
nostalgia
thematic,
is forever.
There you go. By the
Logic.
transitive property. Yes.
So, 2 teenagers look up at the sky and wonder. The boy tries kissing the girl and proves himself to be a bit of a slime ball just before a man in a medieval-looking armor lands riding a flying dinosaur and vaporizes them, saying, "Scruddy teenagers."
Scruddy teenagers.
Yeah, Terry and Gabs here at the beginning of this
Gabs
episode.
dressed like Cordelia Chase in an early season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Clearly a Halloween cat.
Yes.
Pretty good. Terry has what is a very good Terminator mask. Right
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Yeah,
That's some advanced
my
latex.
brother had one of those
Really?
masks, and you could actually peel the flesh off and the metal was beneath
Oh,
it.
no.
Real weird.
Wow.
I remember because I got really sick that year. I had a Beetlejuice mask that year. I was like really young. I don't know why I had a Beetlejuice
That's
mask.
amazing.
And I was so sick that every time I saw his mask, I almost threw up. And my mom had to cut like my mask to make it wider so I could breathe better because I just kept feeling sick in it.
This
and
is
I
my
just
favorite
couldn't look at my
episode of
brother.
Excelsior
Yeah, I
because
just
we're
couldn't.
learning so much about
I
you,
love this.
and I'm
Yes.
into it.
So the armored man continues to talk in this weird slang that seems to kind of be a post-internet speech, if you will. Like there's some like internet talk thrown in there, especially in the way things are spelled. It's interesting.
Very Judge Dredd, weirdly. Like it feels very kind of British 70s and 80s punk comics. It's got that kind of almost like a Clockwork Orange kind of feel to it.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I like it quite a lot. But you're right. It also has that post-internet, we're getting some text slang. in
almost
there,
We're
seems
too.
literally
like,
getting the at symbol
yes.
for
Yeah,
at.
It seems like text, like computer text slang mixed with Shakespeare almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
It's weird, but also fascinating. Also, initially very difficult to read. And
Yes,
then you got to
it
read
takes
through
a
it a couple of
moment.
times to be like, okay, wait. And like, there were a lot of times where I had to actually like say it out loud so that I would understand like, okay, what is being said here.
So he hears the bang at this moment, and we are immediately back where we ended last issue, which is a perfect turnaround. I love that you hear that bang and then you're back where you were. Alice asks if everyone is all right. Aaron says the bullet must have gone right past them. And in the next panel, she says, it's a miracle, as we see her bloody shirt and realize she was shot.
Yes. It's a good reveal.
I disagree.
You don't like it?
No, I don't like it. I feel like it's kind of cheap to end the last issue on just the bang panel. I mean, obviously it was a lot easier for me because I have the trade, and so just 2 pages later I see what's going on. But I don't know if I necessarily like that. I mean, I think that I would have, honestly, what I would have preferred is if we had had these panels at the end of issue 2 where you see like, oh, the bullet must have missed us, and then you end on
it's a miracle.
Aaron got shot.
Yes.
That would have been better. I would have preferred that over just the bang and like, oh no, what's going to happen? If you had been reading these at the time, you'd have had to wait a month to see. Yeah.
I actually like the way this is done. That it's the beginning that you get the normal cliffhanger, because the normal cliffhanger is that person shot. Are they going to live? But instead of leaving us for a month to deal with that, we are then forced to deal with that the whole issue. We're dealing with, is she going to live? And I think that's kind of fascinating to me. Yeah. What I really like is that Alice then disappears, and you have this panel where KJ is looking back at this empty whiskey bottle sitting on the table, and she says, or maybe she got disappeared like everybody else. There's something about this panel where this focal point is the empty liquor bottle, with KJ asking that question or making that assumption that feels like there's a deeper meaning there too, but I'm not sure what it is. Like it feels like that's trying to say something.
Well, we also get like weird, stark proof that what happened on the football field is not what has happened to everyone else, because we don't get the ray of light from the staff. And when Terry and Gabs are disintegrated, there are bits left over. Parts of their body are still evident on the field.
Yes.
And that isn't what has happened to Alice and everyone else. So clearly there's more than one force active right now in this small fictional suburb of Cleveland.
We find out that Tiffany has driven in parking lots, so she volunteers to drive them to the hospital where her mom works as a doctor. And I love when KJ assumes that Tiffany's mom is a nurse, and she is corrected that she is in fact a doctor.
Yeah, I love that.
Tiffany and Aaron convince Mac to not take the gun. Aaron dreams of ice skating with Ronald Reagan, who assures her, it's in the sky. And this one's great too, because you have basically Star Wars, the historical of Star Wars with the Russians and the Americans. They're actually shooting lasers.
This Charlie Brown Christmas tree in the lower left?
Also looks a lot like the video game Missile Command.
Yes,
makes a lot of sense.
It absolutely does. So she's ice skating with Ronald Reagan. All the other stuff is happening.
And then they're in the pumpkin patch. There are a ton of Peanuts references in these panels.
Actually, I did not notice.
I didn't notice that either.
Even the way that she's drawn.
Even with her face. What the heck? This is so good.
Ronald Reagan assures her that not everyone who gets shot dies, showing her his bloody shirt from his own assassination attempt. He tells her that she has an important job to do, to remember her papers, and hands her a black apple that is bleeding from a bullet hole.
Yeah.
It's really good.
We don't know what all of this is yet.
But it's neat. I'm intrigued. I'm here.
Yep.
This post-internet Shakespearean slang comes over the girls' CB as the man in armor appears in front of their car. Realizing that they are what he calls locals, he changes some kind of voice translator and talks plainly. He aims his weapon at the girls, and KJ pulls the gun and aims it at him, saying she never agreed to leave it.
Yeah.
This might be part of the reason why I want to know more about KJ.
Yes.
No, I can see that. I can see that.
KJ quickly falling under my, categories for primary values in women.
Right. He promises that no one will be hurt, but then he is shot in the head. It was the black cloth wrapped guys who take the translator and tell the girls that these quote unquote old timers would not have helped them. The girls called them aliens, and as they unwrap their faces, they say, "We aren't aliens. We're just like you. We're teenagers."
Bum, bum, bum.
I love the beat right before that. What is wrong with you alien dicks? This guy was going to help us. It's a pretty good line of dialogue.
Yep.
You get a chance to say that in real life, you should probably say that in real life.
And seeing their faces, they are in fact teenagers with some deformity and what looks to be circuits in their faces.
Yeah, like weird cybernetics.
Yeah.
Cyborg teenagers.
Cyborg
the worst
teenagers.
kind of youths.
And that takes us to issue 4. Translated text in the beginning: "The future is now."
Nice.
A strange old man with what appears to be a religious symbol on his forehead wakes up in a very normal-looking room wearing a Public Enemy t-shirt.
And his weird Apple phone
His
with
weird
an
Apple
eyeball.
phone.
Yep.
Yes.
That's the only thing that actually sticks out about his room, because other than that, it's a pretty normal room.
Otherwise, yeah, it just looks like a normal room.
Yeah, the weird thing about the phone is that the eye opens as the phone starts to ring, and
Yeah.
that's not cool, you
I
guys.
don't like
I don't
it.
know if that's a real thing that
I don't
actually
like
exists.
it.
That's a weird nostalgic throwback, but no,
I don't
that's
think so.
real bad.
I think that's the sci-fi part.
Yeah.
So he answers this phone call. An armored woman stands over her recently deceased comrade from the last issue and informs the man that he has been unmoored.
Which is a cool way to say dead.
Yeah, it is.
The old man instructs her to call down an editrix, much to her apprehension, saying they can't risk another sea day. The girls wade through the sewers with the two teenagers, who introduce themselves as Heck and Naldo.
Good future teenager names.
Yeah.
Heck and all that, yeah.
KJ mentions that they murdered that armored guy up there, and Heck corrects her, saying he executed him. Murder is what that man did to his boyfriend, which Mac replies, ew, and KJ is surprised by her.
Yeah.
Heck says it's okay, though, stating, don't worry about it. You guys are from an effed up time. And I love that the comic isn't afraid to show things just like they were, as we mentioned, but still is able to comment on the way things were and not endorse it.
That's
Yeah,
how you get
exactly.
to do it. That's good job, Paper Girls.
That's literally the
how
only way
you get to do this
it.
thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
I also like the explanation here of why they can't just go back in time and save Heck's boyfriend, where Max says, why can't you just go back and turn back the clock and save him? And he says, your ending is your ending, no matter what.
Yeah.
That's a really fascinating line.
It is. It is.
And a great way to deal with time travel paradox.
It certainly is. Yeah, we get a few suggestions here. They come from the year of 13. Oh, right. We kind of rolled back the odometer after Calamity ended all the, we're getting hints of
Right,
this
the
Sure.
C-Day.
odd
Calamity,
future here, the
C-Day,
C-Day,
exactly,
which I
yeah.
like a lot. But this is it now. We're in our Brian K. Vaughan sci-fi plot.
Yes.
Yep.
There's no more, well, wait, is something mysterious going on?
No, it defo is.
It super is. And we've got time-traveling tourists from the future, who are
Yes.
coming back to scavenge tech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I also really like the way the writing is done here, where Heck says your ending is your ending no matter what, and then the panel cuts over and to Tiffany saying, but can we maybe start from the beginning? And so there's something poetic about that.
Yeah.
To me. Him saying
No,
the
there
end is the end.
definitely
She's like,
is.
can we start from the beginning?
Yeah.
I really like the way that flows in the comic. A sound is heard, and the boys freak out, and Heck realizes that the translator has been tracking them, so he smashes it. The creature known as the Editrix emerges, a glowing green goo sphere with mechanical tentacles tipped with cubical eyeballs that shoot lasers.
I don't like the cubicle. I mean, like, obviously I like it. It's a cool design. It's wild and weird and awful, and like it's supposed to invoke these feelings. But I see
Yes.
that cubicle eye, and I'm just like, oh, like
Yeah.
I hate
Yeah.
it.
It reminds me of the old Dungeons and Dragons like books where they put like the creatures on the
What
front,
is the name of that monster?
It's a
in D&D?
beholder.
A beholder.
beholder.
That's a beholder right there.
Yep.
Yeah. Except it doesn't have the giant, the eye that dominates its actual
Right,
central
and the
mass.
angry mouth.
Yes, exactly.
The
exactly.
Langolier mouth.
It's described as a Poincaré construct as well, which I find really, really interesting. 19th century French mathematician and philosopher and physicist Henri Poincaré,
Okay.
which is, I don't know what that means.
It's something like
but that's a really great
non-Euclidean
phrase.
fluid
Yeah.
or non-Euclidean geometry.
It's a Poincaré construct.
Okay.
That's all you need to know.
Well, is it? I feel like I need to know more.
The creature blasts Heck, who had the gun. The girls cry out to KJ to shoot it, but she admits she didn't bring any bullets. She just brought the gun for intimidation.
Yeah.
I love that she says, I just wanted to make sure that no one else got and is cut off by Tiffany being choked by the creature. When Tiffany is being choked, her life flashes before her eyes and she sees herself playing the same Nintendo game, Arkanoid, over and over as holidays and seasons pass.
Yeah.
And we even get to see her jacket opened as a Christmas gift in one of the panels,
Yeah.
which I really like. KJ tackles Tiffany, ripping the tentacle from the creature as blood spurts out. Naldo, who now has Heck's gun, opens fire wildly on the creature until Heck assures him that it's over.
I really like the sequence.
It's
I'm
really
not at all
cool.
sure that I understand it. I mean, the connection between human beings and technology is clearly something that's very important. And we get this idea that Tiffany has wasted her life, that she hasn't felt as though she's accomplished anything, but, you're 12. So
it's probably
still
fine.
Playing video games all day, all year when you're a kid is actually not the worst thing that you can do. But even then, we're getting the separation between like digital experience and actual experience.
Right.
She wasn't having the nostalgic 1980s experience that we're associating with the story. She wasn't biking around the neighborhood with her friends.
Right.
Yeah.
This is something very different. It's really good.
It's really cool. What's really neat is right before we get into this flashback sequence where we're seeing, everything that Tiffany has gone through and done, we see that her pupils change to squares really quick whenever the thingy has hold of her.
And the panel there is canted too to lead you into the fact that the next 4 pages are vertically aligned.
Yeah, so when you're holding the book, you gotta like flip it sideways.
And that panel just twists right into it.
Yeah, it was really cool.
And after that is where we get the line that I opened up everything with, talking about how she's been playing those video games, wasting her existence. And she says, God, I can still hear it. I can still hear that crappy music.
So what is the function of the editrix? Do we have any sense of what this thing does?
Okay, so you said that it was named for a French mathematician.
I'm not sure that that's terribly significant.
Well, I just mean, like, what did he do? Like, what sort of math did he do? Did he find some sort of, like, God particle math?
No, it was nothing like that.
Oh,
but
okay,
it was, I think that it's referred to as a Poincare construct simply because it doesn't look like anything that would be found in nature. It looks, angular and constructed.
Sure.
It's geometric in that sense, but I don't know that it really speaks to Henri Poincaré's, underlying philosophy.
Okay.
But I'm curious about what we think it did to Tiffany. Was that an incapacitation attack to distract her before it murdered her?
Well, I don't know. She just said that like her life was flashing before her eyes. So and I mean, obviously it was something that the editrix was doing to her because her pupils change, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it's just, is it supposed to like placate you as it's strangling the life out of you?
But it placates you by reminding you of what? Your childhood?
Life?
Yeah. Well, is this her most like important and most comforting memory?
Well, when you're 12, you don't have a whole lot of like concrete memories, though, is the thing. I mean, like the first 4 years of your life, you can probably barely remember even at 12. So you've only got about 8 years to work with. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know, Alistair. I've only read the first volume.
I think it is supposed to kill her, maybe, or it's supposed to do something horrible because the armored lady seemed very against using it.
Sure, that was my reading too. Yeah, deploying the editrix against locals is apparently something that we should be concerned about.
Yeah.
But Poincaré was basically the foundation of modern chaos theory, which is what kind of connects us to the idea of non-Euclidean geometry and weird, outrageous geometries and that kind of thing speaks
the
to me
doorway into the Necronomicon and Cthulhu.
And not so much math and physics there.
Not chaos worship. Chaos
sorry. My bad.
This is not Warhammer 40,000 that we're doing.
So the girls continue to follow the boys, even though, once again, they have no translator and they can't understand them.
Yeah.
Mac is very off-put because of her homophobia, and KJ calls her out on it. Mac says, so we're just going to follow these two perverts into the woods? You know how this joke ends, right? And KJ says, will you quit it with that? You sound like my racist uncle. Besides, these perverts just saved our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well played.
I do like where Max says that you can't trust teenage boys, perverts or not. Even my brother says that they can't be trusted, and he is one.
Nobody would know better than a teenage boy, am I right?
But then again, KJ isn't having any of it. She says, so go back to the nightmare tunnels if you want. But I do trust these guys. They reach the boys' ship, which looks exactly like the thing that the girls found in the basement. Seeing the way the ship works is something out of a David Cronenberg film.
Yeah, it's gross. I hate it.
A lot of body horror. You familiar with David Cronenberg?
Yes.
I assume, Alistair, you are. Yeah, a lot of body horror from the 80s and very weird things happening.
A lot of flesh as technology and technology as flesh.
No, thanks.
Not good, happy
I'm
things.
good.
But some good movies.
Yes.
The boys climb into the ship with Aaron and motion the other three girls to wait. The ship takes off, dematerializing into swirls in the air, and the three girls, not having understood, now assume that the boys kidnapped Aaron and ditched them. Mm-hmm. KJ, having trusted the boys and pushed Mac to do so as well, says, I fucked up, and now we're all alone. Our last page zooms out to see the armored lady with other armored people riding pterosaurs ready to descend upon the girls.
Mm-hmm. It's a great ending to the episode. It is maybe a little bit unjustified in terms of the cliffhanger, because it feels like we're creating a little artificial tension here again that we don't necessarily need.
Yeah, I feel like the situation is pretty tense already.
Yeah, actually, yes.
Yeah. So the back of this issue has the most common answers to a questionnaire from the back of issue 2. Do you guys want to look over that real quick, actually? Because they're kind of
yes.
cool. So the questionnaire, the first question out was, what is your favorite movie of 1988? And the top 5 answers, I guess, was Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Die Hard, Beetlejuice, The Naked Gun, and The Land Before Time.
The Land Before Time.
88, not a bad year for movies, it
Nope.
turns out. I think I would probably
89
rate
is
Die
my
Hard
favorite year,
above
but
Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but okay. What came out in 89?
A lot of things. I'd have to look it up, but I was on a podcast about movies once, and they asked me what my favorite year in movies was, and I looked up 89, and it had every good movie I ever cared about.
Okay, great. 85 is
fantastic.
a really good year. 85 is a solid year.
What came out in 85?
1985 was The Goonies and Back to the Future and Weird Science and Legend and Clue. Like, there
Oh,
are
wow.
a
Okay,
bunch
no,
of
all
good
right.
films.
That's a good year.
Oh, The Breakfast Club. Like,
yes.
pretty solid touchstone movie there for 1985. I'm into it. Yeah.
That sounds great. Yeah. no.
1989, Vinton.
Okay, so 1989 had Little Monsters, one of my favorite movies, The Wizard, one of my other favorite
Wow.
movies, Batman, Ghostbusters 2, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Dead Poet Society, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Back to the Future 2, Lethal Weapon 2, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, Gleaming the Cube, Do the Right Thing, Heather's Kiki's Delivery Service, Bill and Ted's
What?
Excellent Adventure, Kickboxer, Pet Cemetery, Uncle Buck, Puppet Master, UHF, and Toxic Avenger 2.
Also, The Little Mermaid.
1989 wins.
Also, I
That's
will
it.
say, I forgot that I had a note on here that 1985 is my close second because of Explorers, Clue, Return of the Living Dead, Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Back to the Future, The Breakfast Club, Brazil, Daryl, Return to Oz, Transylvania 65000, and The Goonies.
Wow.
I haven't thought about Daryl since probably 1985.
Yeah,
Actually.
me neither, actually.
We'll sit down and watch Daryl with you.
That
Sarah.
sounds great. All
You'll
of that
love
meant
it.
nothing to
You'll
me.
love it.
So, the second question was, what was your favorite TV show of 1988? Top answer, Star Trek Next Generation. That would have been mine.
As it should be. Yep.
Alf, Roseanne, The Wonder Years, and Cheers.
Huh.
Pretty good. I mean, Alf was a terrible show. I'm going to get emails about that, but Alf was a terrible disaster
I
of a
like
show.
Alf.
Also, you
But-
hate the intro to Cheers.
I do. No, I hate the
Oh, the
intro to
intro is
Cheers.
terrible, but the show's good.
Cheers is a magnificent
Yes.
show. Cheers is maybe arguably the second best sitcom ever, only after
Wow.
Frasier. Like,
Wow.
what that show did, yeah.
Intellectual
pretty
man over
damn
here.
Frasier is one of the best shows.
Yeah, no, I love Frasier.
It's my favorite relaxing show. Takes all the stress away. Question 3. What was your favorite song of 1988? Top 5 answers were Sweet Child of Mine by Guns N' Roses.
Pretty
Nice.
good.
Smooth Criminal by Michael Jackson, which
Nice.
probably would have been my answer,
Sure.
although I haven't looked up other songs. Pour Some Sugar on Me by Def Leppard.
Nice.
Okay.
Don't Worry, Be Happy by Bobby McFerrin.
Wow.
Got My Mind Set on You by George Harrison.
I don't know that one.
Yeah, you do. If you'd heard it, you'd
Oh,
know it.
okay.
Yes,
All
I
right.
promise you've heard
The
that
first
walking around the
3
mall.
I could play really well on Guitar Hero.
There you go. Sweet
Fact.
Child of Mine stands up. That's a solid song right there.
Question 4 was favorite music video of the year. And the top 5 answers were Fat by Weird Al Yankovic, which I did not know that was so old. I just forget that he's been around that long.
Yeah,
I
he
guess.
is. Yes.
2 was Never Gonna Give You Up by Rick Astley.
Oh my gosh. Did they know? They didn't know.
They didn't know.
They couldn't have known.
Simply Irresistible by Robert Palmer.
Wow.
Kokomo by Beach Boys.
Nice.
And Wild Wild West by The Escape Club.
Not by Will Smith.
Not by Will
Not by
Smith.
Will
That was 99.
I like that you know that.
You were very certain about that. You were emphatic. As
on.
president of the Will Smith fan club, I would like you to know, sir, that was 1999.
It might have been 98.
I hope you're right. If
I
it's
hope
not,
I'm right, too.
All of this is staying in the show.
This is gonna be great.
Wild, wild West.
I saw that movie in theaters. I remember it being terrible even then.
It wasn't good.
I don't think I saw it in the.
But I think
Holy shit!
was it 99? It was
It
99.
was 99.
Yes. There we go. Welcome to your Will Smith fan cast.
It was 1999.
Getting jiggy with
That's
it,
the
the
title of the
podcast.
fan cast.
Parents, they just don't understand.
We all loved Will Smith in 1999. We had no choice.
Do we not still love Will Smith?
Sure, why
We
not?
accept
Yeah.
some odd career choices, but he's
Yeah.
still
I'm sorry.
good,
Did
right?
you listen to our Suicide Squad episode?
I didn't.
You know what? You're
No.
right, though. We
He was
liked
the
the,
best
movie
part.
he was
Yeah,
in.
exactly
We just
right.
don't know
Yeah.
what movie he was in.
Question 5. What was your favorite video game of 88?
Ooh.
Super Mario Brothers 3.
Yep.
What?
Probably would have been mine.
Yep.
Altered Beasts, Double Dragon 2, Mega Man 2, and Super Contra.
No, it's
Super Mario
Brothers
3.
3.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
clearly. Yeah.
We're all of one mind on this
Yes.
one. Favorite toy of 98 or 1988 was question 6. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles,
Yes.
Fair.
G.I. Joe,
Okay.
Lego,
Yeah.
Mask,
Oh, Mask.
yep, and
I
the
loved
real
Mask.
Ghostbusters, not the fake ones, but the real ones.
Sure. Yeah. Yes. The real
Actually
animated
having-
Ghostbusters.
yes.
Okay. Yes. I remember those toys being very cool. Actually, no, Mask
Yeah.
was amazing though.
I had a
Do you know
was
Mask?
Mask?
Mobile Armored Strike Command spelled with a K, so that it spelled out Mask.
Oh God.
Totally awesome. People wore masks that gave them powers, and then they had vehicles that transformed into other vehicles, but not like transformed, because we're not allowed to say that, but they changed into other vehicles.
They
It
were
was
Power
fine.
Rangers. They were Power Rangers.
Power Rangers with vehicles.
Power Rangers meets G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Okay, they were every 80s toy ever.
Yes, they were.
Yes.
They were super cynically created to appeal to me in 1988, and it worked.
I had a lot of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figures. I was kind of obsessed, but Lego's always going to win for me, guys.
Yeah,
I was a Lego
for
maniac.
sure.
Lego's pretty
Absolutely.
great. You know, when I was growing up, we didn't have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because the word ninja wasn't allowed to be used in marketing in the UK. So no kidding, for my entire childhood, those things were called Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
No way.
I still have to make that translation in my...
Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles.
There it is.
You guys remember?
That is literally and exactly what the theme
Yeah,
song was.
TMHT.
TMHT, that everyone knows.
Question
That
7.
sounds like some kind of rave drug. I don't know.
Kind of does, actually, yes. It's the ooze.
Power Rangers.
What was your favorite comic book of 88?
X-Men, right?
Amazing Spider-Man, Batman Killing Joke,
Sure.
Uncanny X-Men, G.I. Joe, and The Tick.
Wow, the Tick.
Mine's
Gosh, that
obviously
really
going to
was
be
that
X-Men
old.
with Spider-Man as a close second.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Yeah, late 80s was very good X-Men territory. Yeah.
The other questions were just specific questions so they can know where their readership was coming from. But those were the nostalgia-related ones that were
Well,
really
that's
fun.
That's
Fine.
excellent. I like that a lot. Yes. Hey, comics creators, include more fun quizzes in the back of your
I'm
book.
sitting here trying to decide, how do we include fun quizzes in our podcast for our
Ooh,
listeners?
I like that.
Well, to start off, if you have answers to those questions that we just went off, we'd love to hear them. Hit us up on Twitter.
Yes, go tell us what you loved most about 1988, and better yet, go tell us what the best year for movies ever was.
Yes.
I suppose
Yeah.
there's probably a few internet pages dedicated to exactly that topic.
Probably
but
so.
Go tell us, what is the best year for movies? What is the best year for comics? What is the best year for video games?
Yeah.
And I guess what is the best year for music?
Yes.
I want the answers to those questions, and we'll maybe do some kind of special wrap-up roundtable conversation
Yeah, that
about
sounds
that
really
in
fun.
the near future.
At
Yeah.
Excelsior Cast over on Twitter.
Issue 5. The translated text from the beginning says, "Now is gone."
Uh-oh.
Aw.
So you went from issue 4 saying that the future is now and now is gone.
So we
future
get
is
these
gone.
pairs. We get
Yes.
nostalgia is death, death is forever, the future is now, and now is gone. That's
Huh.
a nice
Very
little
interesting.
It's a
structure
weird-
for the...
Weird little poem is
It
what
is, it is, yes.
It's a weird little poem.
Aaron awakes in the ship looking out into a warehouse, or as the boys call it, their win house.
Because time travel, you guys get it?
The boys now both have translators, which they call squawk boxes, which I really appreciate. In a shocking page reveal, there are mechanical bugs mending Aaron's wound.
Nope.
That's pretty bad.
Nope.
On the page before, though, there's this cylindrical monolith here in the middle of the room with the Apple logo on it
yep.
that looks a hell of a lot like a Mac Pro from a couple of years ago. You know those black cylindrical Mac Pros that still look a foot high on your desk and no one liked
No,
them
I know
because they
nothing about
overheated?
this.
Okay, I'm going to show you a picture of that after the podcast
Okay,
is over,
good,
but it
yay.
looks very familiar. Yes, except this one is clearly
This one's giant.
12 feet tall.
Also,
yes.
the translations there literally says aisle on every aisle. And the boy is just saying on it when he's told to get the translator.
Okay.
Or something like that. Like, I'm on it. Yeah, I think it's I'm on it.
I don't like the weird fleshy interior of their
Nope,
capsule.
very Cronenberg.
It's very bad. It's very
As a matter
not
of fact, in a
ideal.
few of the panels, I noticed there looks like maybe there's a nipple.
Oh, there
That's
definitely
supposed to be-
is.
that's
Look at
what-
that.
Show me that.
No.
Wait, guys, you know what this is? Mm-hmm. It's Upsy, your lifting friend.
The boys inform Aaron that they are scavengers. More like scavengers than thieves, they say. Yesterday's trash is tomorrow's treasure. And then they say, yeah, can you believe that we found this badass spaceship in some dump? Which is clearly a shout out to one of my favorite films of all time, an 80s film, The Explorers, where a group of kids build a spaceship from things in the dump using plans that they were sent from space.
That's wild.
I like that a lot.
And then I really like that Aaron questions about why is it a spaceship if you travel through time? And they explain, well, since Earth never stops moving, it's a
Yes.
bad idea to travel through time without also considering location because we could try to go to this location in a different time and we just end up a little bit away from where the Earth was at that time.
Yeah.
Which at this point in the issue made me wonder if that was what had happened to everyone. If all of the people in the town had been
interesting.
displaced in time, but not displaced in space.
So it's not fully explained, but the boys somehow use one of Erin's papers to triangulate their return to her time. And this is exactly why, as far as I can tell, Reagan told her in their dreams to remember her papers.
Yeah.
Do
They needed them
newspapers
for
have?
this.
I mean, like what? Like, I mean, obviously you're gonna have like the date and like the weather, but I
Yep.
mean, did local papers generally have? I don't know, latitude, longitude,
Yeah.
location in
Oh,
space.
if you look at the back just before the sports section, just after the classifieds, you have like tempospatial coordinates.
Oh, okay.
All
See, I
newspapers
always
have
skip
those.
that. Dad would
Yeah.
be reading those, and I would
No,
just grab
exactly.
the funnies.
Yeah.
missed
Actually,
out.
sometimes they're encoded into Family Circle. You just have to understand the language of the
Every third letter, and then numerically transcribe it.
You know, Billy's weird dotted line adventure
That's
around
like
the town.
where the Earth is.
Yes, that's where you
Okay,
are in time
okay.
and space.
God,
Yeah.
Family Circus makes so much
Have
more
you
sense
never
now.
watched Doctor Who? That's literally the only way in which Family Circus earns its place in the newspaper, by the way.
The boys say that the old timers are trying to ground them, so they're going to have to break curfew, which I really like that those,
Yes.
those words. That you
Yeah,
said
I love all.
specifically.
Yes, I love it.
The ride gets very bumpy at that point. Back with the girls, KJ has an idea that the ship they saw in the basement might be the boys' ship. Since it can travel through time, maybe that's where and when it landed.
Mm-hmm.
They are cut off by the armored lady arriving and asking them to surrender. But Tiffany pulls the gun on her, saying, I'm not going to stand here and be eaten by some bitch's dinosaur. I'm finally going to do something with my life. She references the video game that she played so much as motivation. She doesn't want to be stuck or wasting her life anymore. Previously, she was the most cautious one who quickly wanted to leave any dangerous situation, but now that's changed. Previously, she was the one that wanted to get out of the basement saying this is some Texas Chainsaw bullshit. And she had that caution, but now she's really stepping up and stepping into that place there. So that's very interesting. Pointing the gun at the dinosaur gets the lady to drop her weapon, which Mac then picks up and accidentally shoots, knocking the woman out.
I love when Tiffany is like, Mac is like, what just, and Tiffany says, I don't know, but you should not be allowed to touch stuff that can accidentally shoot people.
Yeah, good call. Good call.
What's in your hands, Mac, is maybe everything.
Maybe everything.
Maybe don't touch anything.
Just don't touch things. Stop touching. The armored woman wakes up and calls the weird old guy who is wearing an Apple Records shirt, informing him that the girls are dangerous.
And he's just pouring himself a cup of coffee in what
Yep.
looks like the most normal kitchen ever.
Yep,
And
and he walks from that
then-
normal kitchen into a gigantic room filled with tubes containing people and says he will punish them himself.
Yes, including Gabs that we saw earlier
Yes.
on the football field. So we know that I guess she didn't die, but was transported away. Something weird is going on.
Erin dreams of being a little girl, approaching her father who was weeping into his hands at the news as the news announces John Lennon's death. She says, "Why are you sad?" And he says, "I'm more afraid than sad." And she says, "I didn't know grown-ups got scared too." And he says, "Oh, honey." And as he pulls his hands away, he exposes his melting face
Gross.
and says, "We're terrified."
He shouldn't have looked into the Ark of
Pretty
the
bad.
Covenant.
That is like the perfect. This is exactly like every 80s horror movie. I feel like,
it
it
is.
in this moment.
You're
here.
right.
You just imagine like the bad lights. There's a strobe light going off in the
Sure,
background.
yeah.
and it's
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
Like he just has like pizza on his face or something. It's supposed to be like his face melting. Erin awakes and the boys inform her that the ship isn't going to last. She asks why they would help her so much, and Hex says, "You girls remind us of us, kids just trying to make a living, are always the good guys."
Welcome to the 1980s in film, you guys.
Yeah, and I think that this is what I'm nostalgic for.
Yes,
That
yes.
very specific idea. Kids just trying to make a living are always the good guys. That is what
Exactly
I have
right.
nostalgia about.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the
And-
Mighty Ducks philosophy right there.
Yes.
I guess they weren't trying to make a living, but you know.
Well, I
it's
mean,
the
you
same.
know.
Yeah. With that was the dying words. Both boys appear to have died, and the ship alerts that it must be evacuated in its strange alien language. It says, "You must evacuate now." Erin stumbles out of the ship to find her friends in the basement. KJ was right. I love Mac's turnaround here when she asks if those fruitcakes, quote unquote, hurt her, and Erin informs her that they died saving her life. And you see this transformation in Mac as she painfully says, "Those guys died fixing my mistake."
Yeah. It's a really powerful moment. I
Yeah.
love this as a resolution to the issue.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But the weird old guy has shown up outside, demanding that they come out and surrender, saying that those juvenile delinquents lied to them and that they have stumbled into a generational conflict. Just as Alistair mentioned, this is actually what's going on here. This is the teenagers versus the adults, this conflict that these 12-year-old girls who age-wise are actually going to be entering this conflict. This is actually maybe a story about how they're entering this conflict of becoming teenagers. And they've stumbled into this generational conflict, this age-old conflict. He says those boys fancy themselves Robin Hood, stealing from the past to fund the future, but they're just a murderous gang of thugs. I really like the idea of stealing from the past to fund the future.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
You get to like show up in like year 13, whenever that is, with like a brand new iPod, like first generation iPod. Who knows how much that's going to go for?
Erin looks out and sees the old man and she mutters to herself, the tree of knowledge.
Yeah.
Which is really fascinating. And I want to dive more into
Bring
that.
it almost full circle here in the volume. Yeah, we're almost done with this story. But it's,
yeah.
Drawing us
Exactly.
all the way back to that dream at the beginning.
The girls try to escape, but the ship revs up and blows, flinging them through time. KJ lands in a body of water somewhere unknown, but the other three girls land in a street as a car approaches. When it stops, Erin introduces herself as Erin Ting and says that they need help. But the woman who gets out of the car with headphones plugged into her iPhone asks if this is a joke because she is Erin Ting.
And that's the end of the first volume of Paper Girls.
That's pretty good.
That's how you do a cliffhanger.
Our girls have found themselves in modern day. Well, 2016 modern is when this comic came out.
I guess so. Yeah, I wasn't sure because as we're falling through time, we get this flash of 1999. So I thought for a moment, oh, we're going to end up in 1999.
Sure.
But clearly not because you're right. That's identifiably an iPhone right there.
Yep.
And a smart car. So
Yes.
the whole thing makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So Brian K. Vaughan, in an interview I read just after this came out, he was talking about what he was going to be doing with the next story arc because they were talking about, well, you had all this nostalgia. You can have any more of that. He says, well, I'm not sure. They specifically said, I would describe the first one as Spielbergian. And he said, I worship Spielberg, but I think you'll find much less of that in the next arc as our heroines are catapulted from 88 to the far-flung future of 2016.
Wow.
And he says that Cliff Chang and him wanted to do a story about kids from the 20th century confronting their adult selves in a future that's nothing like Marty McFly's world of flying cars and hoverboards. Actual hoverboards, he says. But a future that's equally amazing and terrifying for so many different reasons.
That works beautifully because, of course, we're crashing this generational conflict into itself.
Yes.
Now it's teenagers versus adults, but we're all the same people.
Yeah.
We're all the product of our previous mistakes.
Man
I'm
versus self.
fascinated by it.
Kind of. Kid versus man.
Kid versus
self.
adult. Yeah.
Kid self
Kid self versus man self.
man self.
That is my favorite 80s DC comic. Kid self versus man self. You should hear the man self origin story. It's
I prefer
pretty wild.
I prefer the Marvel giant-sized man self.
Appropriately enough for our Paper Girls Volume 1 episode, you are now listening to Alistair from the future. While editing this episode, I discovered that at this point, Sarah's microphone just stopped working. I don't want to blame Vinton's giant-sized man-self joke, but I think we all know who is to blame. Luckily, we are in the process of wrapping up the show, so I'm going to give you the details on next week's show so that you can join us for our discussion of, drumroll please, Batman the Movie. Batman the Movie, crucially, from 1966. We are talking about the Adam West, Burt Ward Batman. It is going to be a ton of fun. I have seen this movie 100 times. Vinton has seen this movie a gajillion times. Sarah has never seen this movie. It is going to be extraordinary. So I urge you all to go track down a copy of Batman the Movie from 1966 and watch it along with us. That is going to do it for our discussion of Paper Girls Volume 1. I hope that you enjoyed our discussion as much as we enjoyed this comic book. You can find us online at Excelsior Cast on Twitter. You can find Sarah at Sarah Cade Pizant. You can find me at Paper Bullets. And you can find the wonderful Vinton at Flesh Eater. That will do it for this week. Guys, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next time with more. Until then, a solo Excelsior? Can I do a solo Excelsior? Excelsior!